I stay bout it, I'm not pouting. Break through walls and climb it mountains. If you want it, scream it loud and show this world what they've been doubting. Never waiting on the world to catch up to me. Leave it in the rear view. I wish that it was up to me. The world would never fear new.
Okay, welcome back to the Braintainment podcast, a special episode today. It's the pilot episode of the video platform, so hopefully all goes to plan. It's an exciting one though. We're joined by Janoah Van Kekem. Is that how you pronounce that, mate?
Mate, you've done all right.
There we go. Fantastic. Meditation and mindset facilitator. We're just chatting off air. I was super pumped to get someone in this space to come on for a chat. And I couldn't think of anyone better. If you've been listening to this show in recent episodes, you know that meditation, mindfulness is a space that I've become increasingly interested in to increase my own sense of calm and creativity and things of that nature, but also to help optimize my output, my performance, which I'm sure Janoah will talk a bit about today. You'll also know that I'm really all about kind of blending personal development with pop culture and making the conversation of learning and stuff like that more prevalent, more cool, and more easy to digest. And I think that's what this guy does really, really well. He's the perfect fit for this show. That said, he has had well over 3 years of daily practice under his belt with meditation, and then undertook another 18 months of study and further daily advanced meditation. Some of the businesses he's worked with in the corporate space include Red Bull, TimeOut, SalesForce, Ray White, just to name a few. So as much as he's a super genuine and relatable guy, he really knows his stuff. And we're going to dive into a pretty important conversation today, but also have a lot of fun. So, mate, with that said, welcome to the show, Janoah.
Mate, thanks for having me. Look forward to a chat with your kind of approach.
I mentioned at the top there that I do really like your style. I think it allows more and more people to connect with you and then encourage them to kind of dip their toe in the water of meditation, I suppose, particularly if they're first timers, so to speak. On your website, mate, I really enjoyed this. This is kind of what drew me to you in the first place. It actually reads, "Hello, I'm a meditation and mindset facilitator. One thing I'm not is a spiritual guru levitating around in a robe, although I do have the legs for it." And mate, as much as I've got all the time in the world for the spiritual space as well, I immediately get the vibe that you're approaching this world of meditation from a very kind of tangible point of view, I suppose. So I guess to kick things off, the whole conversation of meditation, is this something that everyone should be incorporating into their life in some capacity?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, so, prior to learning to meditate, I was very anti and not open to anything I deemed as spiritual. And unfortunately, it didn't allow me to try anything or try meditation for a long, long time. And then when I finally did it, I was like, this shit actually works. Like, you don't have to be caught up in the spiritual world. And I'm spiritual to an extent. But that is kind of irrelevant. You can use this practice and it just works no matter what you believe in. And, over 4 to 5 decades now worth of, Western science and a shitload of personal experience from people now just puts it up there as the forefront of uplifting how you experience the world, and also helping us to remove a lot of the things that are, stopping us from having whether it's, higher level of performance at work or being, more happier and engaged in your relationship, whatever that may be. And meditation now is just like, it's a standard thing that I believe, and from the research I've done, that if everyone were to meditate, things would really, really shift. So, I mean, you're right, that the big aim for me is around just normalizing it. And so people are like, yeah, it's like I meditate and be open about it. It's like, I'm interested in performance, so I meditate, not I'm weird and woo-woo, so I meditate. That's kind of the shift that I'm trying to work on.
Yeah, mate, I completely get it. So for you then, tell us a little bit about your story. So then how do you first get into this world of meditation? I've heard you talk on a couple of other shows and just sort of diving into your world, I suppose. I know you played a bit of footy growing up. So how do you kind of go from that culture, I suppose, and then start dipping your toe in the waters of meditation? What's your story?
Well, it's a bit of luck. So, I grew up around playing a lot of sport, and I talk about quite openly that for me, my level of validation came from being good at sport and being good with girls, right? As a bloke growing up. And so I place a lot of effort and emphasis on those things. And they're all very externally validating things of how good you are and all that sort of the rest. And also, funnily enough, in, because I was so attached to those things, I developed a level of anxiety around those things, right? So I would feel like physically ill, like I wanted to vomit before games of footy, or before, like I was a good sprinter, before a race, I'd want to physically vomit, and would hope I'd miss the start because I was so anxious about that sort of stuff. Similar with dates. I was like, I wanted to vomit sometimes before dates. Like, that's not really cool and powerful, is it? And I went through life this way, and then obviously used alcohol as a great number, and that gave me so-called confidence. And that's how I navigated my life for a long time. And I was quite ego-driven, and a lot of these things I didn't realize till afterwards, till you look back at hindsight. And so being not at all open-minded and very much, based around this external validation, I thought these things were just what you dealt with as a human being, right? You just push through as a bloke and you talk up the good stuff. And, that's kind of how it was. And that's as far as I went. And anyone would say, if anyone said something to me that didn't align with the way I thought about things, I'd tell you to get fucked. And I was pretty, direct with that. And so I'd spent some time in corporate. I was a tradie for a little while, commercial landscaping. I managed a bar. I was in hospo for a bit. I studied a couple of degrees. I did a master's in commerce in the end. And then I ended up working in corporate for a little bit, and then moved to my longest role, which is working as a state manager for an alcohol company in Sydney. And it was by luck that one of my clients were meditators, and they were just normal in my view, right? They still drank alcohol and ate meat, and the guy was a surfer, and they were just really high performers and operating this really high creative level. And I was really attracted to them. I was like, wow, these people are cool. And they just own the fact they meditate. And they were like, the guy was like, man, I just wish I'd learned this when I was younger. Like, this is just such an epic technique. And then I started researching performance and high performers around the world. And there was a common thread again, meditation, mindfulness. I was like, okay, if, these guys are acting this way and it can be normal, and all the high performers around the world, a lot of them are, using these techniques, maybe I should look into it. And I just kind of learned based on that. And just kind of, I was very resistant, but intuitively there was something else. I was like, mate, get out of your own way, do it. Because I knew there was more. I was like, there's got to be a better way of living. I reckon my potential is up here and I'm down here right now, but what do I do? I had no idea. And that was sort of what was also just prodding me in the back end. It's just try it, mate. And so I did. And that was about 7 or 8 years ago that I learned to meditate. And then I just stuck to it, because I'm pretty decent when I say I'm going to do something and also invest money in something. I committed to it, and I just stuck to it every day. And then things started to shift. I was like, oh, and then I started to realize one of the biggest shifts is around awareness, right? And this is the big part around emotional intelligence, which is really, really important. If you're unaware of anything, how do you change anything? If you're not aware of situations and people and whatever's going on, it makes it really hard for you to be expansive and engaged and creative and perform sort of up here. So a big part of that for me was around, oh, wow. I started picking up on triggers and things that I was doing. And then my anxiety was just like pretty much disappeared. Like, I used to have to put headphones in my ears and watch a movie or something to go to sleep, because I couldn't cancel the thoughts in my mind. Right. And I drank a lot and all the rest, and which, drinking's fine. I still drink, but there was a different reason behind my drinking there. And so my world started shifting, and then I started operating up here and then up here and then up here. And then I also asked people like my parents and close friends, like, oh, do you think I've changed much? And they're like, woo-hoo. Yeah, man. I'm like, right. And it was just total, like, my relationships have gotten juicier, and I'm just a better bloke, you know what I mean? Like, just all around. And I'm operating at a high level, and I even look at pictures now, like from me versus 8 years ago, I look so much better now than I do back then. And so I was like, I'm just feeling, and so that started happening to me. And then I looked around in the world of meditation teachers, and 98% of them, none of my mates would have learnt from, right? They were all maybe a little bit too purist, or, too, in my opinion, so maybe a little bit too purist or overly spiritual, or there was a level of hierarchy and the guru-ness going on. And I was like, no wonder none of my mates are learning, because they still don't understand what meditation is. And a lot of the people that are working in the space aren't all that relatable, I wouldn't say. And so that was what kind of, and then I was like, oh, and it always just, something about it always intrigued me. I was like, maybe I could become a teacher. No. And then one day an opportunity came up and I saw my teacher was putting together, or was offering a course, which is an 18-month course to become a teacher. And the specific style that I was practicing and study is called Vedic meditation, which works with mantras. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I moved from working in the alcohol industry and looking to launch my own distillery. And I was like, nah. And shifted to this, and I studied, and then did lots of heavy, like more advanced practices to obviously stabilize my nervous system. And that brought me into becoming a teacher, which I've now been doing for the last just over 3 years, I think. And about 18 months ago, I actually resigned from my, job with the booze company just to be doing this full time. So that was the
That's awesome, mate. I love that. Yeah, super relatable. There's a lot to unpack there. And for me, mate, I reckon the couple of takeaways as to, I guess, what drew you to meditation in the first place, very similar to myself. And with conversations that I've had with people on this show, but also off air, seems like a bit of a common thread. And for me, that's really twofold. One is to help alleviate these symptoms of anxiety, particularly when they're unnecessary. Obviously, as a human being, we're wired a certain way. There's going to be some levels of anxieties, and it can be good in some circumstances, but a lot of those times, and you touch on a few stories there, whether it was with girls or footy or whatever. And again, I can relate. I know people listening will too. There's an unnecessarily high level of anxiety, and it plays out in all different ways. So for me, that was a big draw card for just looking into this idea of meditation and what it could do to kind of relieve some of those symptoms, I suppose, or the stress of anxiety. And the second part was, how can I actually become a better performer? And I like how you said that there's a couple of people that you saw that were performing at a high level, and you thought, okay, what are they doing that I'm not? And being able to see that as an opportunity. So for me, I think that's really twofold. The reducing the stress and the anxiety, but then also being able to optimize my performance. I think that's huge. So I guess for people listening then that are considering this idea of maybe trialing meditation, before we talk about best practices, let's just dive a little bit further into what some of the benefits are. So we've mentioned some there, the anxiety, the performance. Is there any sort of biological, like what's happening when we're meditating? Like, let's maybe start with the basics. If I'm someone going, why the hell should I care about this stuff? How can we help them understand that this is a really powerful tool? Let's start there.
Perfect. So the way our bodies operate is we accumulate stress, fatigue, tension, all experiences that we have. Every time we flip into anxiety or flip into stress, that leaves a chemical memory in the cells of our bodies, right? And our whole life of conditioning, right? Over our years up until now. And this creates the nervous system printout of why you and I will look at the same thing and you'll see it as stressful and I'll see it as an opportunity. It's based on our conditioning and a little bit of genetics. But to be honest, in a lot of these things, a lot of it is conditioning that we can sort of shift over time. So we accumulate this, and our bodies naturally process, stress, emotions, feelings by feeling. We've also become a society that we aren't very good at feeling, right? We're all up in our heads, especially as blokes. We don't feel. I remember, like, you're a pussy, you're a bitch, don't be a soft cock. And I remember at footy, I remember having like an injury and being told by some of the older footy players, you just got to push through that, mate. So I was being trained to disattach from my body and my head and just push through mentally. And so that translated into everything, and it wasn't cool to be the soft, sensitive guy in high school, was it, right? And so as human beings, when we feel things, that's our body processing. And what we do is we numb, booze, sex, porn, drugs, being busy, whatever it is. We suppress, we just push it away. And we escape by doing some of those similar things as well. And so our bodies are just like accumulating and building up all this stress and tension that we're not able to launder. And going for a run or punching on a boxing bag isn't going to release that stress in the system, right? That is great for the body. And especially for us, it's easier. Yeah, I'm going to go release some stress. It's like, okay, but you're also putting your body under stress and acting your body to recover from that. And so there's a deeper level of accumulation energetically in the cells of our bodies, right? Now, all of us as human beings, we also have a potential of operating performance, right? Whether that is your creativity at work, whether it is your ability to, be engaged and put in a good performance with your partner at home or in the bedroom, whether it's, how fun you are and relaxed you are with your friends, whether it is how, sharp you can be doing numbers, whatever it is, that's all performance potential. But then there's our actual performance. right? So all of us, when we're at our best, say we're a 9 out of 10, how often and how regular are we operating at that 9 out of 10? For a lot of us, we're sitting down at 6s, 5s. Some days we drop to a 4. Maybe we hit a 9 for a couple of hours here and there. Now, the barriers to our current, where we are now and where we want to be, are the accumulation of stress, fatigue, tension, mental distractions, and that's piling up over our systems. When we go to bed at night, our bodies do a little bit of processing, right? You go to bed, your body rests a little bit, it releases some of the stress out of your system. The next day you wake up a little bit better. Your body's also processing a bit of stuff during the day, but when your body starts processing feeling, we tend to, don't like this, have a coffee, get busy, do something else, and we push it back down again. And what's happening is, because the amount of stimulus we're exposed to now, just in like one day, outweighs our body's ability to process, we're waking up the next day with debt, right? So you look at how, like, biologically, right, our bodies, evolved to deal with the environment. The environment has sped up for us so quickly, maybe since the Industrial Revolution, a couple hundred years, but in the last 50 and even the last 10 with technology and social media, our bodies haven't had a few 100,000 years of evolution to keep up with this. This is why we are now a society that everyone's either anxious, depressed, can't sleep, got negative thoughts, whatever it might be, right? It's so common. And, it's something that now as a human being, we're just experiencing, and it's become too much. So what meditation does, and again, there are different types that engage the mind in different ways, but the type that I work with the mantras, is designed to engage the mind in a certain way. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the mind and the body, right? So when it engages the mind in a certain way, by using these sound vibrations, they're not affirmations or meanings, it allows the body to get into a state of rest. Because most of the days we're in survival mode, right? For most of us, it's like, right, survive, challenge, perform, blah, blah, all this sort of stuff. We don't get a chance to really rest. And so what happens is we get ourselves into a state where our body responds by de-exciting. The nervous system de-excites. We stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and repair response. And our body has innate intelligence, right? Think about it. Like when you get a cut or you get an injury, your body tends to heal that by itself, right? It does things without us telling it to do it. And so when our body is in a level of balance, it has amazing intelligence and it can do some pretty amazing stuff. And so when we move out of survival and into this rest mode, and our bodies are able to finally work on the stuff that it needs to do, it can start releasing and processing some of this buildup of stress and fatigue, i.e. the barriers to our increased performance. And this is why meditation is so potent and so important for all of us. Simply, if you're a human being, whether you're feeling stressed or not, if you're a human being in this world, you are experiencing and taking on more than your bodies can process at the moment. And that's the basics of trying to keep it not too long.
Mate, that's awesome. Dude, I could geek out for hours about this stuff. I really could. Yeah, it's super interesting. And it's funny, like the paradox of what we're talking about is, like, I find a lot of and we'll talk about setbacks and hurdles to getting into meditation, starting practice in a minute, but it's like one of the hurdles is generally, I'm too busy, I've got this going on. And, you mentioned that we race to the coffee or a beer or a glass of wine, whatever it is, to feel a certain way, right? We're trying to change our state. And then also, we go. And I got no beef with that. Like, I'm super ambitious and, I'm all about setting goals, and the worthy pursuit of goals is intrinsically rewarding. But the paradox is taking the time out to meditate. Not only do we change our state, which is what we're trying to do when we do all these vices that we all have, but then also this go mentality. It's almost counterintuitive to some extent when you run into fatigue and you cook for 3 days and you can't bounce and you're wasted. Instead of taking the 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, we'll talk about practices in a moment, taking that time out to then, reset and then go hard again. Like, it's an interesting paradox I think a lot of people miss. So it's good to hear you talk about what's actually taking place so we can start to, I guess, conceptualize why this really is an important daily practice that people should have in their life, to some extent. So you mentioned Vedic meditation there. Let's talk about the different types. So if someone's listening, they're going, this all sounds fucking cool. Where do I start? Where do you start? What are the different types meditation? Because I know there's a few different. It's not just one,
Mm.
practice. What are the different types? And talk to us a bit more about the Vedic meditation style that I know you're a big advocate of.
Yeah. So meditation's literally like the word exercise, right? So you want to go exercise. What do you want to do? How do you want to engage the body? What do you want to achieve at the end of it, right? So, if you have a really, bad back and you need to be quite gentle, whatever it is, you don't want to go and do CrossFit, or, you might hate or really not want to lose too much weight and want to keep bulking up. You're not going to just go do endurance running, right? So same with meditation. It's an overarching banner term for different practices and techniques that engage the mind in certain ways. So I would define meditation mostly as a mental practice, but there are different techniques that engage the mind in different ways and thus have different outcomes. So there's a lot going in there. It'd be like me trying to explain exercise and in general. So to break it down, there are sort of two main categories I like to break meditation into, and there's the non-directive and the directive. So the directive styles of meditation is where you see like your concentration or your contemplation styles of meditation. So you're actively trying to maybe place some awareness on your thoughts, or maybe you're trying to visualize something, or maybe you're trying to focus and concentrate on a flame or the end of your nose or your breath, and it's like single pointed focus, right? So they're using effort. A lot of these techniques are aligned to the mindfulness styles of meditation. So mindfulness itself is not meditation. Mindfulness is the practice of being present in the moment. And there are meditation techniques that help you achieve this. But being mindful itself, for example, is something we can all do every day. How often are we actually mindful when we're drinking a cup of coffee? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? Are you here? Are you half sipping it, half writing email, half checking Instagram? We're not mindful, and we're decreasing our attention span as well. So these practices can be great for helping with your focus. Pretty much all the apps that you see out there are shades of these styles of meditation. And I would sort of classify them as mostly sort of watered down, tweaked versions of practices that were used by monks. And, so the most power and impact you get from these is by doing them for longer periods of time and as much as you can. They're really easy to sort of guide people through and learn quite quickly, but probably harder to master and get really advanced results from. So they really can be really easy ones just to drop into here and there and easy to get your head around. And most of the apps are shades of this style. So just think they're active. So there's some sort of effort going on. They're great for calming you at a point in time. So the stress in the now, so you're like feeling a bit, all right, just a bit, a bit anxious and overwhelmed. I'll quickly do a 2-minute guided calming meditation. I'll quickly do a visualization, whatever that might be. The other main category is the non-directive. So meaning you're not trying, or there's not as much effort, it's not as active. And these are techniques mainly Vedic, and if you've heard of TM or transcendental, it's a type of meditation, which they both are very, very similar. And they use mantras, which they don't have meaning, they're not sound, and they're not affirmations, or it's not like I am powerful or whatever it is. They're just literally a sound vibration. And in quantum physics, which is what I love how now science is unraveling the Eastern philosophy. We've got 5,000 years of Eastern philosophy, and now we've got Western science going, oh yeah, Albert Einstein was onto something here.
Yeah.
There's still
as soon as it's printed in Western literature, people are, okay, now I see what you're saying there.
It's a thing. And I won't go down the whole pathway of, the economy and pharmaceuticals. And if we're learning something that we don't need to buy ongoing pills to put in our system, and something that we can just do without anything, that's not ideal for a lot of big companies, right? So there's a level of research that's sort of done and then also not done. But the way the body works is, everything is energy, right? That was one of Albert Einstein's quotes. Everything is energy, right? Everything is energetic vibration, at the subatomic level. The unified field is the idea that everything is connected and everything is energy vibration. So all of our body operates at a certain energetic frequency, right? You know how glass, right? You can shatter glass when you play sound at a certain vibration. You're not touching it. So if you think about that, a dog can hear a certain frequency of a whistle. We don't hear, but it's still there. And traditionally they'd use different sounds and music and mantras to heal certain parts of the body at vibrational levels. So what happens is the world throws us out of balance, and these mantras engage the mind in a certain way to go beyond the relative thinking. So that's the ego and the negativity and the resentment and the worry and what keeps, the choppy mind that we all navigate every day, that keeps us up here. So the mantra engages the mind. And what it does is you just whisper the mantra, it's like mantra, and you drop below just for a minute or a second. And when your mind goes beyond that, it almost gets that state of rest. It's like, we're not trying to, in survival, navigate the world. And this is when the body relaxes and all that juice and processing of the old build-up of stress and fatigue can happen. So these techniques are designed to work off the old built-up stress and fatigue. And so fundamental is that they are not concentration. A lot of people define this style as concentration technique, which it's not. It's just like it's why it's taught in a lot more detail. It's actually normally taught in person over a few days because there's understanding. It's like almost the concept of surrendering to it. So you're just literally whispering the mantra inside the mind, and it's doing this amazing thing that it does, and getting your nervous system to a state of rest. And so that is kind of the two main categories of how they fit into. So I look at, the mantra, the Vedic is like this daily practice that you just do every day. And it just keeps doing its work. And it's designed to put your body in a state to do the work. So it helps the body in a sense that it's not always going to feel nice and beautiful and calm and deep. And you're still thinking, and often it feels uncomfortable because your body's doing the work. So you can feel better when you're outside of the meditation. Does that make sense? So it's not designed to be beautiful. A lot of people try meditation like, this is so uncomfortable, get me out. It's because there's stuff processing. We don't like feeling discomfort.
Yeah.
So that's within your system. So when you allow your body to do that work once or twice a day, it allows you to bring a better version of you to the world outside of the meditation. Yeah,
it's just touching on that point, we're just highlighting there. Like, I think that's where people, certainly for myself anyway, at the start of my meditation journey, so to speak, it was very much like hearing all this and having, being a part of these sort of conversations that you and I are having now. It's like, fuck yeah, I need to really I see how this is going to really improve my life. I'm going to, feel better. But then you sit down and then it's like, oh, fuck, what's going on here? Like you're stuck with this, whether it's emotions or whether it's just your body, in pain or whatever it might be. I think that's where people maybe don't keep up the daily practice, because the first sort of couple of times they're trialing a meditative practice, they don't like it. They don't immediately feel it doesn't work, or it's not for me, or things of that nature. So let's talk about, I guess, the rate of turnaround to start kind of experiencing these benefits. Like, can it be something that is instantaneous? Is it something that needs to be executed in terms of a practice daily for a certain period of time before you reap any benefits? Like, does it vary depending on the person? What are some important things to consider, by way of the benefits coming to you in certain time periods, if that makes sense?
So it's very much a case by case, depending on your nervous system and your experience of life, and my nervous system and your nervous system. It's very different. But most people find when they learn this style of technique, they'll feel a bit of a shift. Now, that initially might be a good shift or a bad shift. Some people will learn, and within the next day, they're like, wow, I just feel so much calmer, and I'm not as negative, and I'm more creative, and I can sleep for the first time in 2 years properly. And then some people will experience initially some stress release. And so stress release doesn't feel great. So that's stuff that's stored in your system that is going to accumulate and going to manifest into disease, mental issues down the track at some point, or overreaction. So you're allowing this, like, it's almost like, imagine having a shaken up bottle of, lemonade, and every day just like slowly releasing the pressure. That doesn't always, doesn't always feel good. And so it can be different. It can be a bit of an uncomfortable sort of feeling initially, but I'm always very wary of I don't give deadlines to people, because I've had some people that, like, in the first week they fly and they're like, hell yeah, this is the best thing ever. And then some people who go through the discomfort for a few months and it's like a bit grindy. They're like, yeah, I feel better, but sometimes meditation is really off and they're resisting it. And I just want to get out of it. And I might just stick with it. And then it sort of integrates to like, Oh yeah, I get it. So it can be very different. But again, and in a similar way to exercise is you can't just have a weekend or meditate for 2 weeks, i.e. exercise for 2 weeks, and think you're going to be shredded for the next 6 months, right? It's consistency has got to be the kicker. And we're also externally, we are constantly being bombarded with to make you happy, fulfilled, confident, sexy, whatever it is, you need to go buy something externally.
Yeah.
So we're also navigating, that's how we're conditioned. Every single thing we now is so heavily, and they use psychology, of course, to, hit our desires and needs and wants as human beings. And we feel the only way we get that is by enter external thing here. And so it's very hard for us to then also have that and then have this uncomfortable thing going on.
Yeah.
Oh, this doesn't feel good, but that if I just buy that, maybe I'll feel better. And so it's also, that can be really difficult for us to move through as well.
Have you seen, just to derail a little bit, but have you seen the Social Dilemma on Netflix? Yeah.
Yes,
So
I have.
I feel like we could just riff on that for hours, but that's really interesting. I mean, I think we all know, like, obviously social media is designed a certain way, but just to your point about, psychology working against us sometimes, when there's people in labs basically designing apps and programs and advertisements to fucking pull it, the dopamine spikes and things of that nature, we get stuck in this trap. So I think even if it's just to kind of escape from that for a minute, these meditative practices are a good way just to take stock of like what is and what isn't important and not get stuck in that fight or flight kind of sympathetic nervous system you touched on earlier, not get stuck there, which is easy to do when you're glued to social media. So I feel like that's a whole other can of worms, but yeah, it's an interesting doco, isn't it?
It is. And the interesting thing is that we're all under this illusion that, we all just want happiness and love, really. Right?
Yeah.
And we're under this illusion that we're going to get that by someone or something else. And, get that dopamine hit of that person you like texting you, whatever that might be, or the hit of like purchasing something that we, have wanted for a while. But also during meditation, what we're doing is our bodies are releasing those bliss chemicals as well. So they're releasing, serotonin and dopamine in the body while we meditate. So also what we're doing is we're relearning that we can feel better without the external. Does that make sense? So we're starting to also retrain ourselves, because whenever you finish meditation, no matter what goes on in the meditation, I guarantee you, 95% of the time, you're always going to feel like, I just feel better. And that is your body's like, oh, I didn't do anything except for just sit here and say something weird in my mind and I feel better. So we're also relearning that it's like, we have access to this internally.
There's something really powerful about being able to change your state with nothing else other than you, right? So I think that's the more, and I'm far from, I'm very much an infant in my kind of meditative journey and self improvement journey, or whatever you want to call it. But there's something like there's something alluring and intoxicating about being able to just sit and change your state at any moment. It might take a couple of minutes, and obviously over time you get better and you train your nervous system and there's all the other variables and factors. But yeah, I think for me, that's one of the big draw cards as to why I can try to continue my practice, is this idea of being powerful. And funnily enough, like what's, I guess, quite a passive practice, for me, I'm really attracted by the powerful nature of it, if that kind of makes sense. I think that's a really interesting, I'm just sort of thinking out loud now. Something I've just in this moment realized that is a real draw card for me with meditation.
It is, mate. When you can, you develop a level of mastery around your own mind and body, because you start being more aware of what's going on. And if you can shift, you're like, oh, here we go. I can feel myself in this state. You can use techniques to shift out of it, or at least you know what it feels like to be out of that state. That's how you cultivate resilience. And that is power. And you're 100% nailed it on the head there, where there's slightly more flowy, soft technique, which works at a deeper level. Like that deep level of power and resilience comes, from within. And that's what we're cultivating here every day.
Another thing as well, you said, I just want to highlight, is you said that you don't like to put time frames on things. And again, it's probably another can of worms we could dive into, but I was just listening to, we won't derail too much, but I love hip hop music, right? So Russ is one of my favorite artists. Anyway, he actually has this audio book that he put out, or like a book. And And it's fucking awesome. Anyway, one of his quotes in it is trust the what, fuck the when, and never forget the why. I think it's just a really useful kind of quote, I suppose, to apply to all arenas of life, particularly what we're talking about here, right? Is just trust the what. Not only is there's all this recent science coming out about the powerful benefits of meditation, but if, like you alluded to, the thousands of years prior to that in Eastern philosophy. So know that this stuff is important and it works. As for when, it doesn't really matter. Like, continue the daily practice. That's how I would interpret that. And remember the why. Well, increase performance, feel better. And, a lot of stuff I talk about on this show is our North Star, our sort of guiding light should be to feel good, right? Above all else, everything else is strategy, whether it's going after the career, the woman or the man that you're interested in, any sort of goal, like it's all just strategy to feel a certain way. That's how I like to look at the world anyway. So, anyway, I digress.
It is, because it's a really good point. Often I talk to people about this, is like, just go whenever you feel like you're about to fall off the wagon, or you're like, no, stuff this, is like, just go back to why you're doing this again. Like, for you and also for others, because the way you bring yourself to the world affects your partner, your friends. And one of the biggest shifts for me is how much less of an arsehole I am, to be honest. Which was a bit of a slap in the face to realize how much I could be, but I would have kept being that way if I hadn't. I mean, obviously you mature a little bit anyway, but there's a level of shift, and often people are like, well, you don't know how long it's going to take me. So what? I might be meditating for, it might take me 2 months to feel the benefit. I'm like, that 2 months is coming anyway.
Right.
In 2 months' time, do you want to be here, or do you want to be still down here, mate? It's very simple, when you look at it that way.
Yeah, mate, I love that. And I reckon that is huge. And I'm glad we're really harping on this a little bit, because it's like, it's so easy to sit down for 5, 10, 15 minutes to start a practice and kind of, sit in the discomfort and go and write it off. But like you said, the time is passing anyway. And you're going to be pretty hard pressed to have to get up from a meditation and feel worse. Yep. Right. Like it almost always has a positive or at worst neutral kind of effect. And then over time, it's almost always going to be positive. So I think it's really important to see it through. Where should people start? So is there a certain time or duration that their meditative practice should go for? And also, is there a particular time of the day that is, better? Or again, is that just based on the individual?
Well, it kind of depends. I mean, where to start is an interesting one. It kind of depends what you're willing to commit to. So if you look at it and you're like, I can't even take 5 minutes to myself a day, maybe jumping to something where it's 20 minutes twice a day is a bit too big a jump for you off the bat. So maybe you start with something that's, a little bit easy to integrate. Maybe it's 5 minutes, twice a day. Maybe it's an app. But what I find also is that when there's less skin in the game, less investment in time, less investment in money, you tend to a lot easier. Obviously, the impact's going to be less. Like, you're not going to get as much impact from doing an app 5 minutes a day as you are from meditating and say Vedic 20 minutes twice a day. So there's also a chance that you might, 90% of my clients are people who've tried an app, who are skeptical, who've like dabbled in it at the end of yoga and haven't really felt much or struggled to be consistent. They're like, all right, I want to do something that actually fucking works and I can stick to. And so in the sense of, where to start, I'd recommend getting someone to teach you. I mean, an app is a good way to get a bit of a feeling of it because it's cheap, easy, and accessible anywhere. But then being taught to be self-sufficient. So I teach you to become self-sufficient, for example, so you don't ever need to plug into an app again. All you have to do is close your eyes. So I would look at finding someone to teach you, just like, me exercising by watching a video and doing it at home isn't really going to help me versus going to a class and getting someone to explain to me, oh, that's how I'm lifting wrong. I didn't realize that. I thought I was doing it right. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And in terms of like timing, the best time is in the morning. So you start the day, because the way you start the day is often how you carry yourself through the day. So starting your day from that place of being calm and grounded is a really, really good way to start. And then the best time for the second one is, about halfway through your day. So literally you wake up, you set yourself up, the day sucks the life out of you in a certain way. You're feeling a bit fatigued and flat. You meditate again in the afternoon, give yourself another recharge. Like, I don't drink coffee. I love coffee. I don't drink it in the afternoon after about 1 or 2 o'clock because I go to sleep. I can't sleep otherwise. So instead of having my coffee at 3 and not be able to sleep till 2 a.m., I now meditate, and that's my recharge. So, I'd recommend if you want to commit to it, like give it a proper crack. 10 minutes. Start with 10 minutes in the morning. And morning, and then if you can, try a second one in the afternoon, and try to. Accountability is probably the biggest battle for people. So maybe you get a teacher or something like that.
Yeah, I agree, mate. And I like the exercise analogy because it's very, very relatable. It makes a lot of sense. And it's like the same way that if you get trained the right way from the start, you're just going to execute so much more effectively, more efficiently. You're going to enjoy the process a bit more. You're going to get better results. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a bit about the work you do. I know you work, well, I think you do some one-on-one stuff. You do some workplace stuff, which I think is really fucking important in today's world with just such go demands on all of us. The workplace is a really good place to kind of have a big impact. So, talk to us about the work that you do and what's on offer, and we'll dive into that a bit.
I pretty much offer a pretty wide scope. So I offer an in-person group scenario. So I do groups of between like 3 to sort of 8 people where I teach them through. It's a 3-day course. So it's 2 hours a day for 3 days. And that is known as a Vedic technique. So you get your own personal mantra, and I teach you the practicalities and philosophy, and talk about a bit of neuroscience and stress release. I also do private. So one-on-ones, I pretty much do anywhere, anytime. So if you're like, hey, I'm living in, even though as soon as the borders open again, hey, I'm living in Melbourne, I'll do a one-on-one course. I'll come and teach you. The private ones I can do anytime, anywhere. And we can also weave in specifics. So it's like, you might be a couple and be like, oh, we want to work on this. And I can weave in certain knowledge to support that. Then I also have the online stuff. And obviously now, like, you got to have that. So now I teach an online group course, which is like a 4-week course, which is a meditation and mindset course where you get a slightly different level of mantras to choose from. And I weave in a lot more stuff around sort of the positive mindset and working with alignment of values and meaning and purpose. And that is a holistic sort of program. And then also I can do one-on-one in a similar format, one-on-one privates with that. And then of course there's the corporate, which I quite enjoy. So corporate, again, I kind of create a bit bespoke, whether it's I come in to do a 2-day, workshop, just meditation, whether I do a keynote talk, or like just recently I worked with Red Bull. We had like a 6-week program where I came in once a week through video to do Zoom and did like a workshop around different topics and some meditation and played around and that kind of stuff. So I sort of kind of have this like cater to all bits of, I like to keep it diverse,
Mate, you got it sorted. So it's in the workplace front. Do you get any pushback? Like, do you get any people who are stuck in the stigma, who don't want to trial it, or who do and just immediately go, no, not for me?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a level of, the science is there in terms of the ROI on bringing in practices like mental health and practices like, meditation and things like that. But it's still interesting how, unless it's like the CEO or the GM or, someone is really driving it, they'll look at money. They'd rather spend $5,000 on a boozy drinks, buying cases of super dry and shitty food on a Friday afternoon. They'll question, $1,000 meditation workshop for 100 staff. You know what I mean? It's quite interesting that there's still, and part of that's, stuck in still old ways of thinking. But if you're any kind of a forward thinker and interested in, team coherence and interested in performance and interested in saving your business money and absenteeism, presenteeism, retention rates, you've got to be forward thinking and look at what some of the common threads are. And they are working with things like mindfulness and meditation and positive psychology. So yeah, there's resistance, but I noticed that it's the forward-thinking businesses and companies who are willing to invest in their staff that are like, and the ones who are still sort of back and behind aren't. And you'll see that'll play out in terms of how their staff operates. So it's starting to change though, because it's becoming more normal. And I kind of like the idea of, I quite enjoy coming in and talking to people and really like kiboshing the stigma, because you'll see me, I'll walk in and I've got a bit of a rough mouth. I'm sure you've heard, like, I don't stop that. Like, I just am and, drop a few bombs and whatever. And everyone's like, who's this guy? I was expecting some old guy in a robe to come in.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the fun for me as well, And so I just try to talk with businesses. It's like, well, you know, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of research now going into, financial bottom line impacts of having a team that isn't stressed and collaborating together and that kind of stuff. So it's slowly shifting. It's just
I think it
getting
is. I think it's definitely moving in that direction, which is awesome to see. Like a lot of, I mean, even just by way of the statistics around mental health issues and absenteeism and physical health issues, like those rates increasing over time, despite all the advances in, what we've got access to and health and all that sort of stuff. So I think those stats alone are pretty telling as to what's needed in society in general, and the workplace is a really good place to start. We made a couple of jokes throughout about the stigma of meditation, and you being a great person to break that, I think. And I'm very much an MC of my own journey, but that's the approach I like, is kind of being really relatable and talking about really important conversations and really powerful tools and practices from a place that everyone can kind of get around, I suppose. So just to confirm, then, if you're gonna meditate and you're gonna dive into this world, you are allowed to have a beer from time to time.
I still have. I'm a bit of a Negroni bourbon man, so
okay. You're allowed to have coffee.
Oh yeah, I love it.
You can have meat if you choose to eat meat.
Yes, I had sausages yesterday.
All right, cool. Just making sure. All right. So then, with some of the clients that you've worked with now, whether it's corporate or one-on-one or some of the group stuff that you do, what are some of the common themes around some major stresses that you see that they either tell you or that you just kind of observe that can kind of get in the way of not just these meditative practices, but in the way of a good life, which sort of draws them to the meditation in the first place? Like we touched on social media. Like, what are some of the big stresses in today's world that people fall victim to?
So there's a lot on our plate at the moment, and so we're trying to balance. We've got work life, relationships, making money, social life. The social media, and then that all piles up, right? And then what we've also got in our mind is trying to navigate all this to find a little moment of happiness in the world, right? And so what manifests over time, and the most common things people come to me with, it's either it's around anxiety, it's overwhelming stress, it's their inability to calm their mind. They're like, my mind just doesn't stop and I can't switch off. I struggle with sleep. There's a level of I'm not really overly truly self-confident. There's a level of, disconnect between my self-acceptance or what I maybe portray, being able to be clear and focused. And there's some of the main things that people sort of come to me with. And so that is, and by pure, luck, coincidence, whatever it is, if someone was saying to me, list off some of the top benefits of meditation, they also happen to be some of the main benefits of meditation. So it kind of naturally kind of ties in where, if you just sit and close your eyes, they're the things that it's gonna work on. And the idea of stress is a perception. So stress isn't your boss being an arsehole. That is a potential stimulus and a potential stressor depending on your perception. So what meditation also helps you to do is to see the world more for what it is and be less in that reactive state. And so when less things are seen as stressful to you, there might be a little bit less anxiety, a little bit less overwhelm, a little bit less worry. And so less stress is put on the body as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So shifting, the lens of how we look out onto the world as well. And that just naturally starts shifting over time. And that's what I love. One of the best things about this practice I love is you don't actually have to do anything really. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to sit here and actively try and do anything. It's not about clearing your mind and controlling thoughts, because that's impossible. Thoughts are part of this practice. It's like mantra, thinking thoughts, smile, mantra, sleep, thinking thoughts. It's that state of flow that you get into that you want to move into. And that's what I love so much about it, where it's doesn't matter what religion you are, what you believe in. If you think it's absolute bullshit, all you have to do is just close your eyes and this little word, and things start happening.
Yeah. Mate, it's awesome. I think another really powerful benefit, I suppose, is the sense of clarity that you can get, right? So you mentioned earlier about the parasympathetic nervous system and the sort of the rest and digest. another way to talk about the parasympathetic nervous system, but I've heard it referred to as well as the calm and creative state. And I think that is really telling as well, to be able to actually take a minute out. And like I alluded to earlier, like I've got goals. I know you probably do too. A lot of people listening will, and I'm all about pursuing them. But sometimes I just get stuck in this like ball of fucking unnecessary energy. I don't know, right? And it's just, I can't think clearly. And the little research I've done is I think what's actually happening is the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of this new region of the brain, which is like for being calculating and thinking and emotions and things like that. When your body's stuck in this stressful state, is it's drawing all the blood away from your prefrontal cortex, because it's essentially your nervous system going, okay, we need to fight or flight here. So we need blood to the muscles. And so with that blood flow taken away from the prefrontal cortex, it's almost by definition impossible to think clearly. And so I found that, like, and again, far from perfect, but I found that like just when I meditate in the morning and when I don't, there's a big noticeable difference with how clearly I can think. And paradoxically, the days I want to get going and do all this sort of stuff and I might skip my meditative practice, I'm kind of wasting hours throughout the day thinking, what am I supposed to be doing? Or what's the next best move and things like that. Do you know what I mean? Have you found that that's been, is that something that you noticed shifted for you and with the clients that you work with? Was their ability just to think clearly and then plan the next move?
People now say, like, yeah, when I stop, I notice it. Like, it's just, you can see the difference. And neurologically, there's a few things going on. Like when you are in that stress response, you know, you're running from your amygdala, which is that fear center, right? And what happens there is you focus in on purely on threats. So you're looking for is the negatives. Okay, that could happen, that could happen, that could happen, that could happen, blah, 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 blah. We're jutting around, and that gets stronger, right? And our ability to think, you know, we could become reactive. You know, literally, you're right, the blood disappears and just goes to our arms and legs, and it moves away from all our vital organs. You know, when we pump cortisol in the system and adrenaline, so we're on that. It's very primal and reactive and impulsive and driven by emotion, right? Which is really uncontrollable. And when we meditate regularly, we strengthen the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, and that connection strengthens, and that strengthens our ability to think expansively. You know, that executive way of looking at things, learn from our past mistakes. And what actually see now is that the amygdala actually over time starts shrinking, right? Because you don't use it as much, and it becomes less powerful. So you're able to come to situations from a place of creativity and calm and expansiveness, as opposed to fixed focus on the threat, reactivity, judgment, anger, resentment, whatever it might be. And so it starts shifting the default mode of how you operate, which is huge for any area.
Yeah, like I said, default mode, I found, again, from my own journey, I know just talking to people, again, on and off this show, is some people, again, whether it's environmental factors, the way you raise, some genetics, like you're going to be wired a certain way as like a default mode. And I think the best thing about meditative practices and mindfulness is over time, you're reconditioning that default state. I know for me, my default state, it's a lot better now, but it generally is this like kind of, I guess, heightened arousal, like anxious. And unless I'm channeling it the right way, it just plays out in some really nasty ways, like anxiety and things like that. So that's something that I've noticed slowly but surely, is that default state becoming a little bit more calm and creative, which not only does it feel good, which is, you know, should be all our goals in life. But again, it allows me and these people that have shared the same thoughts to kind of approach the world from a better place and just get more done and do more and live a better life, you know, all that stuff.
Yep. Yeah, no, it literally over time, it'll start shifting where you come from, you know, and because when we're not, what you want to create is this, you know, just this unconscious to subconscious program, which is constructive as opposed to destructive. And because most of our thoughts, right, they run off of this program that's the same as the day before. And we, in terms of, you know, our default operating sort of system, I suppose, is, you know, our conscious world and how we, you know, carry ourselves and respond to things is a manifestation of our subconscious and the program we've created over time, right? And often that program isn't necessarily always that constructive, right? And the way we operate is most of our thoughts are pretty much the same as the day before, over 90%. And over 90% of what we do is just this, unconscious program. And so we want to start shifting what that is. So when we're carrying ourselves in the day, the new program is something that's more constructive. And so that's what we're also doing. And the beauty of, neuroplasticity is that we can create new patterns and new pathways and new ways of being. And every time we meditate and awareness shifts and we pick up on a trigger and maybe we change, we're strengthening a new muscle, right, to operate in a different way. And it's just, again, it's consistency and integration and consistency that'll slowly start shifting the operating system from here to here. And then that becomes the new normal. And then over time you continue, it goes here and that integrates. And that's the beauty of the process that you can go through.
I love that. Couple more, and then we'll find out how people can connect with you. In terms of breath work, I know that gets talked about a lot in meditative practices. So what role does that play? Like, is it something to do with the diaphragm? Is it are there certain ways to breathe? Does it depend on the kind of meditation that you're doing? Is that something that you highlight when you talk about meditation? Is how you're actually breathing?
So breath is huge, and breathing. So, in terms of yoga, which is a holistic practice, which is the asanas and breathing and meditation, actually incorporates everything. The pranayama, which is the breathing, it's known as life force, to administer life force. We literally, how do we stay alive? A big part of it is breathing. But most of us, there's a few reasons why we operate in, the stress response. It's short chest breathing. And also I noticed for me as well, I was always walking around, keep trying to suck in my abs, so I don't breathe down in my tummy. I wouldn't want to push my tummy out breathing, so that even that I was training myself. I'd be like, always walking around sucking the abs in. So I'm looking the goods, chest breathing. So I'm also running off stress and anxiety. And if we're not breathing deep and properly and not allowing, oxygen to get into our bloodstream and enough oxygen to get to our brains, a deficit of oxygen in the brain literally makes us, more indecisive, more reactive. We're unable to think, expansively, like literally just from breathing. And so in meditation itself, because the way I teach is non-directive, you let the breath do its own thing. But what I use breath for is sometimes as a state change. So you can use, you can do a certain breathing technique, which maybe is the diaphragm breathing, or, 4x4 breathing, or 2x4. There's different types that can, because the power of breath and all the Wim Hof stuff as well. Like, if you've ever tried that sort of stuff, like I've got pins and needles and spasms in my body just from breathing. Like, breath is so powerful. So it has its place. In what I teach, I don't use it actively because it's a different thing, but I'll sometimes use breath as a lead up into it, like to shift your state, to calm you as a runway into the meditation, or something as a tool that you can have out in the day. It's one of the best ways to shift a state is to use breath work. So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the abs there from tensing too much. I honestly think the more I've been exposed to this world, so without sounding like a dick, I've got abs, I've got this athletic build, and I do work out, and I've been played sports and been active as long as I can remember. But I reckon in large part it's because for as long as I can remember as well, I've been really hot, highly strung, funnily enough.
Yeah. And
I reckon that is carved out just purely from tension in my diaphragm, which it's not a good thing. I notice myself throughout the day just not breathing sometimes.
Yeah. No, I hold my breath. I was getting a massage a while ago. And the guy was like, "Are you breathing?" I'm like, "Oh shit, no." I was just I was thinking about something and I'd held my breath and I was tensing my stomach. Yeah. And even now when I do belly breaths, I look down at my belly and I'm like, that doesn't look attractive. So literally that's what I've created in my mind. It's look at this belly pushing out. No one wants to see that.
Yeah.
Suck it in. It's crazy what we're programmed to look at. And so, but it's not great for our health and our performance.
No, not at all. And it just makes so much sense when we think about it. Oxygen is literally our life force to survive. But even just for moments where there's a deficit in the brain, you can see how you start to feel foggy and stressed and anxious and all those things. Mate, just before you wrap up, just to go back to the top a bit about your style of meditation, so the Vedic style. So that is like more mantra based, is that right?
Yeah.
So then, without kind of unraveling it and doing the whole program now, is there like how does one go about kind of working out what that mantra is? I think you alluded to it throughout the conversation. It can just be a sound. It could be like what's sort of the basic premise of Vedic meditation.
Yeah, so the mantras are something that a person who teaches this style has studied. So you don't choose your own mantra. It's not like, I want to work on love and connection, so I choose a mantra that's designed for that. That's not how it works. If you want to study, I mean, I'm sure you can Google them somewhere, like everything, and you can probably pick one, and there might be some rough around meaning, but that kind of, it defeats the way they're meant to work.
Yep.
And so they're literally designed to have no meaning. So you're not worried about what they think or what it's going to happen to you or whatever it is. They're literally just a sound vibration. And you want to find a teacher who has studied the Vedic knowledge and studied the mantras, who will know the right one to give you. There's different sets of mantras and teachers who've studied it will know, will know what mantra to use. And it's not that simple. It's not like I don't sit here and look at your, energy and read you and go, oh, okay, this mantra comes to me. Like there's set guidelines of stage of life and age that you give a mantra based on. So that's how they work. So you sort of, again, you want to be, ideally, you want to go through and have someone teach you how to use it.
Yeah. So then I'm sure there's a number of people out there that can do that. You, of course, are one. You're in Byron Bay, I believe. So people, if they want to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
I'm most active on Instagrams, where I do most of my chatting and things like that, and through there you can go to my website or whatever it might be. So yeah, do you want me to spell it out or what?
Yeah, maybe do that. I haven't got the tech savvy admin teams to do the little handles up on the screen or anything like that just yet. Yeah. So spell it out and so people can connect with you.
Yeah, sweet as. So it's at JanoahVanKekem. So just my name, Janoah Van Kekem, is the handle, and there can't be too many of them around.
I don't think so, mate. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show for a chat. I think it was a success, the beta version of the video platform for the Braintainment podcast. So I appreciate you being the inaugural video guest, mate. Awesome conversation, like super, super important stuff. I mentioned it a couple of times, but it really is. And I think you're the perfect candidate to come on this show, and to start championing this slow but sure movement towards becoming more mindful and using practices like meditation the way they should be used, daily and for the right reasons. So it was a lot of fun. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, mate, it's good chatting.